Tonight I have a very special guest joining me. Barbara Hand Clow returns. I've had Barbara on the show quite a few times over the years, and throughout 2012 she joined me and all of us here on Achieve talking about some of the significant astrology that was happening at the time and what we could expect. She's very well known for what she does. She's very gifted at what she does. And she went into semi-retirement, I guess you could say, but she has recently released a new book that's coming out, I believe, in the fall that she'll be talking about a little bit tonight. And also another book that she's renamed, Astrology and the Rising of Kundalini, formerly Liquid Light of Sex. This book is an updated edition of the classic astrology text, and for those now through 2050, for those born between 1930 and 2000, renowned astrologer and spiritual teacher Barbara Hand Clow explores the connection between life crises in your 30s, 40s, and 50s, and the key astrological passages of Saturn, Uranus, and Chiron in your birth chart. She goes into explaining in this book how Kundalini energy, the, quote, liquid light of sex, unquote, that lies at the base of the spine, how it is activated during these planetary transits, rising through the chakras and triggering the process of spiritual emergency. We're going to talk about what that is tonight. And in many cases, which triggers a cascade of health, emotional, and relationship problems, as well as extreme anxiety. She shows in the book that by understanding these astrological transits, you can be better prepared for the turbulent periods and successfully navigate them by creatively channeling the spiritual fire of the Kundalini. So what is Kundalini? What is it all about? We're going to based on that tonight too. Barbara provides astrological charts detailing the cycles of Saturn, Uranus, and Chiron, so you do not need your birth chart to use this book. She explains how to use the charts to predict the onset and completion of each Kundalini activation and corresponding crisis. She shares tools for individuals and therapists to cope with the intensity of spiritual emergency and too much fire energy, unblock the chakras, and integrate the power of Kundalini for physical, emotional, and spiritual growth. Reflecting on 20 years of success stories since the book's initial publication, she presents a roadmap for using celestial cycles to navigate positively and productively in times of great life change. Now, who couldn't use a little bit of that, or a lot, depending on what we're going through? We just recently had some powerful eclipses happen. On April 15th, we had a full lunar eclipse, blood moon. We had the partner eclipse on April 28th, which was a solar eclipse on the other side of the planet, but we, of course, still feel it because we're all very connected. I have an announcement to make for those of you listening before I bring Barbara on to say hello and get started. On May 18th of this month, we will be having a global meditation to join in to just connect with the earth and the nature energies. So 1 p.m. all time zones. We have a Facebook page that we've started. If you'd like to get on there, you can sign up on the Facebook page. You can give us some feedback. We are pinning on a global map all of the locations that are joining us, voicing intent to join us. We have a wonderful group forming. I'm taking a day tour down to the Mother Earth Stone Chamber in the Catskill Mountains, where we will be doing meditation at 1 o'clock. We have a group forming in Washington, D.C. that will be meeting at the Washington Monument Obelisk to do the meditation there. We have another team in New Mexico led by Holy One, Apache Holy One, Maria Yesperu, who will be doing a very specific medicine wheel meditation at 1 p.m. And we also have author Hillary Carter, who wrote the 1111 Code, who will be joining us at Avebury at the White Horse on the Hill. And you are invited to contact these people. You can go to my Facebook page. You can sign up on my newsletter. You go to my website. There's information there how to contact the people who have agreed to kind of open up to allowing other people to come in. And it's either a 1 person, 2 person, 3, 10, 20, 50, 100. It doesn't matter. All it takes is 1 person. So if you are that 1 person and you are bold enough to step up to the plate and say, I'm going to hold the anchor here, we will pin you on the map and we will create a grid around the globe. And the intention is to connect to the earth energies. The meditation, it's a cross-cultural consciousness event. So it doesn't matter what you do, how you do it. You just have to do it in love. And that's the only real, I guess, requirement or rule. It's just come into a love space and connect to the earth. Go find someplace out in nature that really, you can get a great connection, pause, love, and then breathe. And that is what we're doing on May 18th. So if you'd like more information, you can email me directly, Hillary@HillaryRaimo.com, and I would be happy to connect you with the places that are gathering in your area, or if you'd like to start your own group, we can put you on the board. Welcome, Barbara. Thanks so much for being here again. I can't wait to hear how you've been and where we're going with all of this stuff.
Oh, hi, Hillary. And I think this idea on May 18th is great because you've just gone through such a difficult period with the fifth Uranus square Pluto on around April 21st. So I think this is great because people are really feeling a tremendous shift, and I think to express that shift by connecting to sacred sites is a very, very good idea.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate that, and I know everybody listening appreciates that too, and it's just time. It's time for us to just do it because we can, don't you think? I mean, we've done all this work, we're here, our hearts are open, we have gone through all of these tremendous things, and my birthday was April 15th, so I went through a tremendous solar return this year. It's been extremely roller coaster ride. I can't wait to hear what you have to say tonight, and I don't know about anybody else, but I need May 18th just to go and sit and connect and settle into the earth.
And the April 21st, you almost could say that April 20th through 23rd period was a real true culmination of a lot of the changes that have to do with raising consciousness. And the reason everybody is so stressed out right now is because basically they have actually changed very fundamentally. But then everything around us has to adjust and readjust, and all the people we're connected with. And so that's why I just think it's such a good idea for you to call for gatherings at this point. Really good.
Thank you. Thank you. And people are responding, and the response has been enormous, and it's really wonderful to see people stand up and say, I'm here, and I'm joining, and, we have this big global map, and we're pinning the locations of the people who want to announce what city and what country and what state they're in, and it's really quite exciting, because every time I post one of those tags up, I'm like, yes, I feel like it's a great thing.
Yeah, and I've been writing articles about the Uranus square Pluto transits. Those are 2012 through 2015, and they're posted free on my website. And so the most recent one, of course, is the article about the April 20th through 23rd period. And the title of that article is just simply Manifestation. And so we actually are now moving into a place where we are going to be able to manifest from a much truer place in ourselves. And so this is just a really exciting but also very stressful moment in time. Everybody's feeling it.
Yeah, and your release of this book, retitled Astrology and the Rising of Kundalini, is really well timed, of course. And so when you say, "Oh, I read that years and years ago," I was reading it and getting into some of it, and it was really interesting to see the feedback and the additional information that you had put in there, and also the confirmation that you had gotten because it was written so long ago. From the initial to now, you've had a chance to add in some information that really does confirm the theories that you were putting forth when the book first came out.
Yeah, and where this really shifted is when the book first came out, I was basically putting a hypothesis across the tramway, which was basically saying that I was noticing with my clients that there seemed to be definite evidence for Kundalini rising, particularly during midlife crisis. And now what's happened is 25 years later, that has basically gone to the level of a theory now. It's pretty much accepted by astrologers and a lot of therapists. And so when you go to that next level where you're pretty certain that what you have discovered is actually really working and affecting people, then everything changes. And so this book is actually about 40% to 50% new. In other words, things had shifted so much during that period of time that it took a complete shifting of the material to bring it to the next level. It's really almost like a new book. Some of my revisions haven't been like that, but this one is.
Well, it's exciting. And I'd also like to mention to those of you listening that you can go to Barbara's website, handclow2012.com. The link is right on my archive page under her show listing. You can find it there. You can Google it. She does post some updates here and there, and so it's a really good resource. I have it favored, in my whatever you call that. I'm not a very technical person, but you can favorite websites, right. And she's in there. Okay, so let's get started. So we're talking about Kundalini. We're talking about crises. We're talking about astrological cycles. I've been talking more and more about this, and I call it biodynamic living. We talk about biodynamic farming and living, planting and growing food according to the cycles. But now, we have to start paying attention to our bodies and our partnerships and the things that we go through in life and the turbulent times and all of that. What the heck is Kundalini? And I know what it is, but for those that don't know what it is or really don't have a solid understanding, how would you describe Kundalini from your point of view when you come and describe it in the context of your book?
Yeah. Well, Kundalini is an Indian word, and because it's such an odd word, it's made it very hard for people to get used to this concept for many years now. And what Kundalini refers to is the subtle energy in the body, the actual life force, the actual reason that we are having an incarnation. And the Kundalini can be detected. For example, acupuncturists use Kundalini energy in order to activate different points on the body. And what we do know about Kundalini is that, I guess, what I always fall back on is it's kind of like the sap in a tree, for the tree. And our Kundalini energy is kind of like the sap in our bodies. And what it does is it flows and it moves through the different energy centers. It moves through the chakras. It moves through the different points in the body. And then at various times in our lives, because of meditation practices or because of midlife crisis, we have a full-blown Kundalini rising. And the big shock when this book was first published in 1991 is that people back in 1991 believed that the way you trigger Kundalini was by arduous meditation practices, which in fact is true. You can do that. But what I discovered working with my clients is that when they come to midlife crisis, which is around 38 to around 45, 46 years old, that all of them had evidence of Kundalini rising, and for some people, extreme levels of Kundalini rising. And when that happens, we call that spiritual emergency, where people actually have a lot of physical symptoms from the energy.
And physical symptoms such as what would people experience when this type of thing is happening in their body?
Yeah, what happens when it starts rising, and let's say this is a person who doesn't know anything about it, and that's who I was when it happened to me. And I was in graduate school at the time. And what happened in graduate school is I started shaking and having hot flashes. And I thought it was menopause. In fact, a lot of people do think it's menopause because it occurs at that age. So when it's pretty extreme, people actually will shake. They actually will have like spasms in their spine. I had quite a few clients who had a lot of energy stuck in the lower areas of their spine, and they had a lot of problems with backaches and stuff like that. When it's rising up through the neck, you can get a stiff neck during the midlife crisis, and you can have hot flashes. You can have a lot of difficulty digesting food, so that frequently people need to eat less meat when they're having Kundalini rising, or sometimes people need to eat more. There's some explicit instructions in this book about issues like that. But it's a very, very intense experience for people. And this is one of those things where you do pretty well with it if you know what's going on. And if you don't, you can have a lot of problems. And by the way, also, Hillary, basically don't go to your doctor and ask your doctor, in other words, like Kundalini rising will actually mimic the symptoms of a heart attack. I had a major Kundalini rising last year. I get them fairly frequently, but the biggest one in my life was last year. And I thought I was having a heart attack and almost went to the emergency room. But if you go to the emergency room, you won't find anything. Now, of course, if a person thinks they're having a heart attack, you have to check it out. And I did check it out. But, of course, what it was Kundalini. And at least I knew what it was once I wrote off the possibility that it was a heart attack. So it's pretty intense.
And then once you figured out for yourself that that's what it was, and you took the proper steps to make that decision, what did you do from that point forward?
Yeah, that's a good question. Like, if something that just goes on, then what I did, of course, I knew what to do because I've written a book about it, and I took a good week or two and just really rested a lot. Took long naps and walks and stuff like that, and just let myself calm down so that the energy could move smoothly through my body. As soon as I knew it wasn't a heart attack, I let it go through the right way. Good soup, just simple living helps a lot.
Excellent. And so in the last book, well, the book when it first came out was called Liquid Light of Sex. Now that it's been renamed Astrology and the Rising of Kundalini, do people associate Kundalini with sexual interaction with their partners? I mean, where do we just walk around and say, oh my God, my Kundalini just rose and it went up my spine and I'm not having a sexual experience. So what's that all about? So, I mean, what is the liquid light of sex specifically?
That was an intuitive title and kind of a wonderful one too, because as it turns out in the craniosacral movement where my husband is a practitioner, the energy in the spine is called liquid light. And I just sort of did that intuitively. But in terms of sexuality, what I'm talking about here is a much wider range of sexuality. Sexuality that has to do with immersion in the planet, connection to the planet. And, of course, sex with partners is very much a part of that. But if people are having Kundalini rising and they don't have a sexual partner, which some people don't, many people don't, then people can meditate and do other practices that help them run this energy through their bodies. But sex is a great way to intensify Kundalini for sure.
Well, yeah, it definitely is. And then once you do, for me, it grounds the higher spiritual energies. So when I connect with my partner and I have that experience, because I can tell you for me, and I'm 41 and I just had a birthday. So I'm in my 40s and I'm reading the book and I'm going through it and I'm going, yep, check, I have that going on. And one of the sections that really, really I appreciated and I'd like to share with everybody is there was a section on partnership and how there's almost a crisis of people who are just not in that quality of partnership where, two people can work together in that sense, or have that kind of spiritual, sexual relationship that expands out into their spiritual life and really merges the two so that they're not separate. Would you want to speak a little bit about that on the partnership aspect and why that's so important and how, go into that a little bit more for everybody?
Yeah, one of the things that I'm the most proud of regarding this book is I think this book on Liquid Light of Sex initially actually has saved thousands of marriages from what I can tell from the letters that have come in. And so I spend a lot of time in the book talking about what happens in your relationship when you're going through these kinds of changes. And whenever anybody is going through some kind of profound change, it's always a stress on their partner, as we all know, and you have to really work on it and negotiate it. And so one of the things that the book works pretty hard on is advising people who have had a long-term relationship and maybe a family and maybe children, maybe really significant deep parts of their lives, that they should be aware of when their midlife crisis is coming. Like in your case, I looked yours up, and yours is more like 2015, 2016, early 2017, so yours is coming up pretty soon here.
Okay. I'm getting ready.
Yeah, right. And so if people know, first of all, if people know it's coming up, then when things start happening, they can identify better the cause of what's happening. And then another thing the best thing about astrology, to me, is that astrology will tell you when it's over. And so when you understand when this period of time is going to occur, it's really a very good idea for people to try to not split up at that point. Now, there may be people who just simply have to break up because it just should have happened a long time ago. But marriages and partnerships that break up under midlife crisis, it's often a great tragedy, broken families, when it isn't necessarily the best choice to make. And then the reverse, Hillary, would be it's also not a very good idea to get married during midlife crisis because you're going through so much at that point that it's almost like taking on a marriage is almost too much. And so another thing that we would advise people frequently was to wait a year or two before they get married in consideration of this transit.
Interesting. Well, I hope that's good advice and that helps people. If you have specific questions or you would like to call in and speak to us, we are live. You can call 602-666-6027. We'd be happy to take your questions, your comments, and if you'd like to speak to us on the air, and perhaps if you have questions related, topic specific, we would be very happy to discuss them. So, Barbara, going back to where we're at. Okay, so we have this powerful eclipse that's happening, and I guess it's the beginning of a 2-year cycle. So what is it that you want people to be aware of most at this point in time, going into the summer solstice, moving into some pretty, intense energies as we go from spring to summer? What are we paying attention to the most right now?
You're talking about specifically this year?
Yeah, specifically this year, yes.
Yeah, okay. Well, we're under the influence of the Uranus-Pluto squares 2012 through 2015. And we've had 5 of them, and we have 2 more coming up. And so what these squares are doing is to understand it, we've got to go back to the 1960s. And during the 1960s, Uranus and Pluto conjuncted, which means they came together in the sky. And whenever Uranus and Pluto conjunct in the sky, a whole new process is beginning, a whole new cycle is beginning, a whole new way of life is being birthed and engendered. So when Uranus and Pluto come to the square position, which is what they're doing from 2012 to 2015, that's when the pressure to manifest the things that started in the 60s hits us like a ton of bricks. And so if you go back to the 1960s, we had a huge wave of creativity and a rising desire for freedom on the planet and equality, and especially that was really the beginning of the ecological movement on the planet. And so now with these squares, what's happening is all those issues are hitting us right in the face. And this is the reason there's so much political chaos and tension around the planet. And this is the reason why we're facing such an ecological crisis at this point. And in other words, the ecological crisis was always there. But fortunately, the majority of people at this point realize that there's something really wrong. And this is when we come to the point where each individual really has to play an important role, because what matters now is what each person does. So
accountability,
really
yeah.
It's really...
accountability.
Pardon? Yeah, accountability. Yeah, in other words, yeah. And the truth is, the more you face it and the more you face it head on, the better you're going to do, because the way these transits affect us, there's no way out of this. We have to face this.
We were on pilgrimage for April 15th for that particular moon cycle. We were in the Rocky Mountains in Colorado, and we were going from site to site, and we had gone up to the top of Pikes Peak, which is about 14,000 feet, and not to watch the eclipse. It's closed at night, of course. But when we were down in the valley of Manitou Springs, we were watching the blood moon turn, and a lot of us came out and watched it for the entire length of it. It was quite spectacular. We were really lucky to be able to see it. And the fact that it was over the United States, do you have any insight or thought on what that was that was symbolic of for the U.S. as a whole?
That's a good point on your part, because there's a tremendous amount of synchronicity in our universe, and astrology is one of the best ways to see synchronicities. And so when there's an eclipse like the blood moon, and it affects the United States the way it did, then this indicates that the United States is on the stage now in some way for some kind of major shift. And then when we look at the Uranus-Pluto charts, especially the one on April 21st, the chart of the United States is tremendously impacted by this particular Uranus-Pluto square. And that Uranus-Pluto square was actually a grand square, because first you have Uranus squaring Pluto, and then Mars was opposite Uranus, and Jupiter was opposite Pluto, and they were all in 14 degrees. And then on the United States chart, the Sun square Saturn in the chart was right on these degrees. So the United States in some way is slated for some kind of reckoning at this time, this period, spring and summer. And I'll just throw one thing out there. The United States is screaming global warming, which we all know is an issue. But the biggest cause of global warming on the part of the United States is the military. It's the building and use of weapons and sending people all over the planet, using jet fuel, et cetera, and grinding up the earth for making more bases, So like the United States is going to have to, in some way, come to some kind of reckoning about what it is causing on the planet. And it's not going to be able to act like it's everybody else's fault anymore,
Well, there comes a point where we have to, and I know you and I have discussed this quite often when we do shows together, there comes a point where enough is enough. We just have to get back to, who we really are, what we're here to do, what our purpose is. And, and I think if we focus our energies on, the evolution of the human body as technology and how it really fits into the natural world, we start to awaken our abilities that we've kind of shut off or have been shut off or whatever, and we start to confirm that with each other as we work together in that heart space, whether we're partners or sisters or brothers or whatever, we're working in circles or we have friends that we do the work with. It doesn't matter because that connection is real, and we can link up with another person and say, hey, what were you feeling just now? And then that person gives us feedback, and then we say, well, this is what I was visualizing. It is amazing what comes out of those interactions. I mean, for me, that's what I've been focusing on since 2014 started, was really going into those spaces with another person and making an agreement to work together and to do the work, and then to move out into the world and see how we can manifest that in a way that's appropriate to honoring it or to doing whatever. And then all of a sudden the Walmarts of the world and the McDonald's of the world and the corporations and the military industrial complex suddenly fade away into the background in a way that's kind of welcomed, because we spend so much time focusing on that we don't often think about the solutions to what it is that we could be experiencing differently, or how we could be in relation with our atmosphere around us, our ecosystem. And we've lost a lot of awareness of our connection to the plant kingdom. And the plant kingdom is extremely important to what we're doing. And I don't know if you're aware of this, because I haven't spoken to you in a while, but last fall I went to Yale University and I had the opportunity to see the Voynich manuscript, which is a wonderful compilation of some plants. A lot of it's unidentified.
I'm sure you've heard. I know it. Yeah, you know what it is.
I knew it. And so I've been studying that since about September last year, and I've been gifted a copy, a reproduction of it, and it's quite fascinating. But it's also opened my awareness to this plant realm. So I've been talking a lot about that, getting people to say, go outside and sit with the outside and see what happens. And the feedback that they're getting now seems to be a lot more detailed. The experience is a lot more for people. And I believe that's because of where we are in our evolution of humanity, and plus the astrology and the stuff that's assisting us cosmically. Have you found that? Have you been noticing that in your sphere of influence?
Oh, yeah. And I'd like to take this back to the sort of first half of this back to the book, because the book went right in the direction that you've been going in the 10th chapter, called Towards a Global Shamanic Paradigm. And what the book is showing is that in indigenous cultures and in earth cultures until around 2,000 years ago, people had various processes of initiation for children and young people. And those processes of initiation and those key passages in people's lives actually match these astrological transits. And so until around 2,000 years ago, people understood that you needed to initiate the children and take them to the next level, and then the next level and the next level. And part of the initiation process is the teaching about how to be in synchronicity with the earth, which of course has so much to do with the planning cycles and the power of the growth process itself. And so what I'm saying, Hillary, is people were actually, this book is kind of an attempt to teach people again about moving themselves into synchronicity, because if you go back into synchronicity with these living energy cycles, you're not going to go to Walmart. I mean, if you went to Walmart, you would be so sick on the floor that it'd be embarrassing, And so this is really the core of this, is to move back into this synchronicity, and then it's going to go right to the issue of plants and seeds and healthy blood and all those things. And there's, of course, a lot of wonderful material being written by people, especially people quite a bit younger than me in this field. And my daughter is a permaculturalist. Our kids are doing it, and we're just amazed by what they're doing with plants and with growing their own food and stuff like that. It's incredible.
Yeah, we almost have to learn. I mean, it's not even really an option anymore because, the way we all have that intuitive feeling that the way our planet is moving, we are moving into, and I'm talking about the larger collective scale, we're moving into, a point where we're just not going to be sustainable. I mean, the growth aspect, all of it mixed in, it's just not a sustainable culture. You have to learn how to take care of yourself, and that's really what it comes down to.
That's right.
And you need to teach your children and your descendants how to do it too. And because I know a lot of kids who think that what is hunting? You go to the grocery store, you get meat, and when they see the actual thing happen, they're horrified. When an animal is slaughtered for meat, but they eat it every day. They just are so disconnected from the death element and the transition element. They don't pray with their food. We've lost a lot of that. One of the things that I've been encouraging my listeners to do and my readers to do, and in my sphere of influence, is really going back to that connection with the earth and making sure that they go out and spend time on the land and get back into the nature frequency. And why it's so important, because we're so exposed to electronics and all this other stuff that we get kind of jarred and we get kind of vibrating with that energy, which is a false frequency, which brings a lot of disease on into the body and things of that sort. And then when we move back out to nature, we kind of slow down and we feel rejuvenated because our bodies are designed to be a part of that on a regular basis. So the meditation aspect, going out and meditating with the land, looking for land signs. It's almost like a tarot reading, but you're looking for earth signs, medicine walks, whatever you want to call them. And you go out there and you listen to the wind and you look for the signs, you work with the animal. And it is very shamanic, but I think we're also moving into a place in time where we don't necessarily need the labels anymore. It's just going out and communing with the earth, and it doesn't matter what you call it, right?
Yeah, I agree.
So we have this incredible happening. We go through this Kundalini awakening. Why do we go through it at certain specific stages in our life and not all the time?
Well, let's go back to this book is focusing on three major transits, and there's a few other ones that are covered not quite so thoroughly. So the first major life passage transit for a person is age 29, when they have a Saturn return. So the person says, well, what is a Saturn return? Well, the way that works is everybody has a birth chart, and in their birth chart and do you know your chart at all, Hillary?
I have to be honest.
Okay.
I have a lot of people, wonderful people do.
Yeah,
but I think you did it.
I think reading, obviously, but Saturn, in your case, you have Saturn in Gemini in the 10th house in your chart, which explains your career and everything like that. So what happens is when a person is born, Saturn is in a certain location, just as it is in your chart. And then since it takes Saturn 29 to 30 years to go around the sun, then Saturn goes all the way around the sun and returns to the place in the zodiac, which is the location in your birth chart. And what happens at that point is people go through a major change in their lives that has to do with structuring things physically. If people will think about it for a minute who are listening, and also for Hillary, you did something at age 29 that shifted the direction of your life profoundly. Sometimes it's a job, sometimes it's a marriage, sometimes you have a kid, sometimes people get a divorce. And what's going on at that point is that the physical formation of a person's life, once Saturn has gone all the way around, is relatively complete. And so they go through a major change so that they can develop themselves emotionally during their 30s. And most of the development for people in the 30s is very deep emotional processing work. And then the next issue, the second transit, is midlife crisis. And midlife crisis is triggered by the opposition of Uranus to your birth chart. So in a given person's birth chart, they have Uranus in a certain position and in a certain sign, And then, because it takes Uranus 84 years to go around the sun, at around age 42, Uranus comes to an opposition. And now there's a variation in these dates between 38 to age 45. And the reason for that is the orbit of Uranus is slightly elliptical. And so the end of the book has charts so that you can get the exact dates of when you get your Uranus opposite Uranus. But what happens with Uranus is that Uranus triggers change and triggers transformation in people. It's basically the archetype of radical transformation. So when it comes to its opposition point, it's just like the full moon. And during the full moon, we have the most intense energy, and so at midlife crisis, we have the most intense level of transformation. And so that's the second transit. And then the third one is Chiron return, which you may want to get into.
Well, I'm awake and I'm watching and I'm waiting to see what's going to happen. I'm definitely feeling something moving around. This year has been pretty intense. I mean, it's definitely been different than, the past few years. I mean, I've noticed a big change. I guess it helps to know when these things are coming. Do you still do readings for people? Can people still contact you and do you do charts actively now or no?
Oh, unfortunately. I've got 12 books out now and a 13th one coming out. And so I just had to stop reading. And when I do read, and I'm hoping when I'm an old lady, and I'm 71 right now, so maybe I'm supposed to be an old lady, but I still don't think I'm an old lady. But I would really love to read again. But when I work on charts, I work on everybody's chart for 5 hours. I work with them for 3 hours and on the chart for 2. And so, obviously, I just can't do anything and with all this work. I'm even though I'm not out teaching as much, I'm doing a lot of interviews and some teaching. But I'm also writing a lot, a tremendous amount of writing.
Now you brought it up, so you have this new book coming, and I got a sneak peek at it. So I would love for you to share with everybody what this is, and because it's a different genre for you, isn't it? It's more of a story.
Yeah.
So it's exciting. So please tell us all about it.
Well, when I started out as a writer, when I was like in my mid-20s, I always wanted to write fiction. But what was going on around me in fiction was the world of Michael Crichton and Stephen King, et cetera, and I just didn't I love English literature, I love good fiction. And so I decided that I could never make it in fiction and that I'd have to go into nonfiction. So I wrote 12 books, 13 books over a period of 30, 35 years in nonfiction, many topics. And then last year, I decided it was my time. So for my 70th birthday, I treated myself to the decision to write a novel. And the novel is called Revelations of the Ruby Crystal. And it's going to come out sometime late this fall or early winter. And it's a novel. It's typical novel in the sense there's a love affair and there are wonderful characters in it. But the backdrop of the novel is priestly sexual abuse. And the characters are all involved one way or another in research on the Vatican and on the Church regarding priestly sexual abuse. So it would be called it's content-based fiction, but it is very much, it's a page-turner from what all the readers tell me, because it's very much a novel with lots of fun and adventure.
Well, I'm sure it is, and I have to ask you this question because I know you. So, to a certain extent, I mean, we've known each other for a few years now, and so was it something that it was easier for you to write in, things that things that you know is going on in the world, or because I find that people who switch to fiction usually end up doing that. It's an easier way for them to work in the teachings, or some of the more controversial type secrets and revelations in the world. Did you find that was the case for you?
Of course, when I started it, all I knew was I needed to do it. You know how it is with creativity. And what happened, the way it happened, was all of the characters except one all appeared one day in my study. And I took out a tablet and wrote down their names, ages, background, religious bias, and all that stuff. And those characters just came in, and they were alive, and then toward the middle of the book, one more character showed up who resolved a lot of the problems with the other characters. But here's what I discovered by doing it. I discovered that what I really am enjoying is I'm enjoying having it's about 12 characters, but about 6 of them are major, and the other ones are just sort of sidelights. And what I've enjoyed is having all of those characters talk about these issues and not having me talk about it and do all the research on it. Now, of course, I have done all the research. I almost got a PhD in early church studies. I quit going because I was arguing with people too much, and I knew I was never going to be able to write a thesis, and so I stopped in graduate school, and then I just kept on researching the topic for 35 years, and so my research is voluminous on this topic, but I don't have to footnote it, reference it, and all that kind of stuff. I'm just really sick of that. And to have each character has a different personality and a different religion and a different mentality. And so for them to discuss these issues and experiences from their points of view makes this book much, much more fascinating.
I can't wait to read it. I really can. I just can't wait to get it because I have all your books and I've read all of them and I have had conversations with you. I've done shows with you. I know your work. I love it very much and I support it 100%. And then to have you, it feels like you've turned into like a Harry Potter writer and I can just kind of picture you being, the author of something like that magical kind of elemental where it gets into the different archetypes of people and stuff. So I'm very excited to see that come out. For those of you who are just joining us, I'm speaking with Barbara Hand Clow tonight. She's an internationally acclaimed ceremonial teacher, Mayan calendar researcher, and the author of many books, including The Mayan Code, The Pleiadian Agenda, Alchemy of the Nine Dimensions, and Awakening the Planetary Mind. She's a regular presenter at international conferences, and she has taught at sacred sites throughout the world. And she is currently spending her time in Vancouver, British Columbia. Her website is handclow2012.com. There is a link on my archive page if you'd like to find your way over there. She has some updated articles concerning the recent astrological events of April that are very interesting. They're also posted on my Facebook page and some other social media sites. If you can find them there, that's wonderful. And I really just have to say this book, Astrology and the Rising of Kundalini that we're discussing tonight, that was formerly known as Liquid Light of Sex, it has a wonderful array of helpful information for people who are going through these massive changes in their lives, different upheavals, kind of inner earthquakes, life-setting earthquakes type things, when you need that kind of advice where people can come in and they can say, hey, this might be what is going on. You don't have to be an astrology expert to read this book. There's nothing more frustrating than to not be an astrology person and to pick up a book and be like, I have to have a degree in astrology to read this and understand it. It's very well written and you can certainly find what you need. And I highly suggest that you go ahead and try it. We have a caller from California on the line. Thank you so much for calling in. You have a question for Barbara or I?
Yes, hi. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Hi.
Oh,
welcome.
good. This is Jeanette. Hi, Barbara.
Jeanette.
Hi.
Hi,
Hillary.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello.
It is so coincidental that, everything is, right? That I would happen to be listening to this, and it just dawned on me that an astrologer told me a few weeks ago in an email that I was going through a transit, and yesterday was the last day.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so fabulous to hear you talk about it because I didn't follow up with her. It was kind of one of her little emails to me saying, hey, hire me. Give me your money so I can give you a reading. But she happened to tell me what the dates of the transit was, and I wrote it down on my calendar. And when you said that, I went back to look at my calendar, and sure enough, yesterday was the last day. Mm-hmm. And that would be for the, for the midlife.
That was the end of your midlife, your Uranus opposite
That
Uranus?
was the end of the midlife, yes, and I felt every minute of it.
To you? What happened to you during the last 18 months?
Well, it's been interesting because about a year ago, I told my husband I wanted a divorce. Mm-hmm. And but I set my intentions to have a very kind and loving adventure through this because I didn't want to end up one of those couples, that were constantly fighting in front of the kids. So I was very determined to have a very loving process, and of course that required a lot of releasing on my part, unbeknownst to me then. But through the last month, it's really turned around as far as how we deal with each other. We're much more loving, much more kind, more of a brother-sister kind of relationship, but I'm still here. You know, there is no divorce paper yet. My intentions are there. I receive messages and guidance that I'm in the next part of my life, that I'll be meeting my true twin flame very soon. Yet this whole, I don't know what it is, this whole relationship, this whole marriage has not completely dissolved yet. But it has.
Jeanette, I think you should read this book. I'm serious. I have 5,000 letters from people who saved their marriages because of this book. This would be. I'm serious. You should test yourself with this book. Then let go if that's what you want to do.
Yeah. No, I definitely let go of any preconceived. Whatever is going to happen is going to happen. So.
Yeah,
a lot of the information that Barbara presents regarding partnerships and marriages and relationships and twin flames and et cetera, really is valuable information in this book. It really does click. It gets the point home, and you can really understand it from a higher perspective, and really what these new dynamics are for all of us as we evolve into, higher form. We're moving out of this fourth world cosmology, according to the Apache Holy Ones I work with and the indigenous that I work with in the Southwest. We're moving from a fourth world cosmology to a fifth world, and a lot of people talk about this, and it's in prophecy all over the world in different cultures. And so we're learning how to become better partners within a new paradigm, and it takes practice. It takes letting go of the things that we have been so conditioned to observe and to reenact. And it's like cutting a loop and just saying, okay, I need to experience a new relationship. I need to experience a new partnership. I need to experience a new Kundalini rising, different higher boundaries that kind of get us into a more spiritual state, and we need to just kind of shift that. And this book gives a lot of really good information to do that. So it's not just another go buy the book and find the answers kind of thing. And I that's not what this is. It's really literally go buy the book and read it so that you can find what you need out of it, because they just jump off the page. The words and sentences just jump off the page, and then the ahas come. Oh, I get that. I know where that. And then you track it for yourself, and you track it through your personal life, and you start to make the correlation between the alignments of these dynamics that Barbara does so elegantly well explain in this book. I mean, I can't get enough information out of her for an hour, guys. I'm sorry.
Also, one of my credentials. I'm having my 40th anniversary this summer, or this June. And I'm not saying that, as credentials or anything like that, but to me, marriages are an arrangement between people where both of them can grow. And one of the issues with the divorce is, letting go of a partner that you've been with for many, many years. You may be in a growth cycle and you may be growing out of it, but maybe you need to grow more, and then the marriage needs to, grow more because of the growth.
And it's also okay to let go. I mean, if you've been in a partnership for 20 years and it's not something that, you feel like you're dragging around somebody like a pound of rocks and it's just dragging you down, then perhaps this new energy is really meant to support you in the cutting and letting go of that. So you can move into a partnership or relationships where you can generate this kind of energy, because that's what we're really supposed to be doing. So if you can't do it with your current partner, reevaluate. And it's okay if you're not a 50-year married person. That's fine. If you have to move on to a different partner, the family dynamics will work themselves out. I mean, nothing is ever really so drastic that we can't move into the most evolved form that we're entitled to be by birthright, by being human. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, I totally agree. It's just that we watch closely when it occurs during Uranus opposite Uranus. Because here's what happens during Uranus opposite Uranus. It's different for a man and a woman. So for a man, usually there's a pretty intense sexual crisis and problems with erectile dysfunction because of Kundalini energy rearranging the chakra system in the male. And so the classic story about midlife crisis is your partner shows up with the red, convertible, and he's ready to find some young babe. It's the classic one, And then as far as the woman is concerned, what goes on at midlife crisis is not as well understood. And this is one of the reasons that such difficulty can arise. When midlife crisis comes for a woman, she wants to be alone. She wants to get out of relationship, out of the house, away from the kids. I had people that I counseled where I even advised husbands to let their wives go on a trip. In one case, a woman went to Sweden for 18 months and then came back home when it was over. And so women really, it's claustrophobic for women. All the issues of can I express myself, can I be who I really need to be, all of that stuff comes up intensely at that point, and it's very difficult to stay in a marriage. So that's why I say that. It's not that I don't believe in divorce. I think divorce is great. But it's just divorcing consciously. And, of course, in this case, as Jeanette said, they worked very kindly and a great deal of understanding between each other, which is great,
Yeah.
So,
Jeanette, have you found that now that it's officially over, did you feel it's only been a day, but did you feel any kind of shift or notice in your body, even just within the 24-hour period?
Well, what was interesting is I pull angel cards for, just for fun every day. And this morning I pulled one and it said, the cards read forgiveness or nature, forgiveness, and then the last one was celebration. I thought that's weird because I don't feel anything close to celebrating right now because I just woke up in a really horrible mood. And but what was interesting, I went outside. I spent like 3 hours out in nature and just completely let go. And then I heard the show, and I was like, oh, well, of course, yeah. I do feel different.
Well, that's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. And if you missed it, May 18th, we're joining in a global meditation to do just that, to go out into nature and to connect. And we're doing it at 1 p.m. all time zones. Anybody from anywhere is welcome to do it, whether it's alone by yourself or with another person or with a small group of friends or kindred spirits. However you want to do it. We're on Facebook. If you'd like to find me on Facebook, you can find the event and you can let everybody know where you're coming. And what we're doing is we're pinning a good old-fashioned thumbtack on the global map of each person that lets us know where they are. And we're gonna kind of just build that as a visual to see ourselves spread out across the globe and connecting with the planet and focusing on love. And no matter what it is you believe or do, it's a cross-cultural consciousness event. And I say we because it's kind of like all of us, we're so happy to have anybody and everybody who's willing to do that and to take a moment to pause and to love and then to breathe that love out in whatever way, shape, or form it calls to you. And our hope is to get people to be more aware of that body-mind connection to nature and to help tap into that frequency to see what their body feels and then to give feedback so that other people can say, hey, you too, huh? Or, oh, this happens for all of us. And to start realizing that this is a species-wide phenomena. It's not just where you're at in your spirituality, how enlightened you are, how great you are, how much you know, how much you've meditated on a mountain or wherever. This is just an across the board. I don't care if you're in the Walmart's parking lot. If it's 1 o'clock, just check in. Just open your windows and let the air in. You might not want to go in and finish your shopping afterwards, and that's perfectly fine. But, it's definitely something to think about. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
So did you have any other questions you'd like to ask us real quick, or do you feel complete with that?
I feel pretty complete with it. Yes, I think I'll get the book. Sounds good.
Thank you, Jeanette.
Well, thanks, Jeanette.
My angel card today was joy.
Oh, joy is good.
Yeah, it was joy. And I don't feel very joyful right now. This is very intense what's going on.
I don't either. I don't feel joyful. I don't either.
Yeah. It's hard to feel joyful right now. But I said, thank you, angel card, for reminding me.
Thanks for calling, Jeanette. Yeah, thank you so much for calling in, Jeanette. It was a pleasure to speak with you. Have a great night. So, Barbara,
well.
we go into this, with thinking that it's not okay to express the harder emotions when we go through things like this. There's a lot of, when somebody goes through spiritual crises or they have an emergency, and, sometimes we're lucky enough to have an inner circle where we can pick up the phone and call someone, or make time to talk to somebody through it, or have some advice from our mentors or our sisters or our partners or whatever. And, I have found in my own experience, and also working with my clients over, the years, is that it's often looked and frowned upon to be feeling no joy, or to be feeling like you just don't want to get out of bed, or to be feeling depressed and sad, and walking through those emotions of these kinds of crises. So how do people deal with that? What advice would you give people quickly? We're kind of wrapping up the end of the show, but I think it's so important to touch on that.
Well, we're on the same page here regarding connecting with the earth. It is definitely the most soothing way to handle some of the difficult levels of emotions that we're having at this time. And another thing that's going on is we're in the middle of a cyclical change regarding the weather and climate and everything, and none of us really know exactly how that's going to turn out in our given regions. And so I think being more in tune with nature and expressing the love and the heart for nature is what's going to help us be part of the planetary experience as we go through these different levels. And I also, Hillary, find I know you do too, just reading. Sometimes I just get to the point where I just sit down and just read a good book, because it could be so meditative to read. Or I just simply meditate. But it's important to do those things now. Very important.
Yeah, I find for myself, and I'll share this with everybody, is that, I find that it's a matter of self-care. It's a matter of getting up and just taking good care of yourself. And you'd mentioned that at the beginning of the show also. It's very important. And for myself, it's writing, it's going through the creative process. I have to share with you, last night was the first night that I picked up a paintbrush and painted my first painting. Writing wasn't cutting it for me anymore. Wasn't going, I take that back. Writing is cutting it. It's just I was finding myself not able to go deep enough. And so I had a dream, and it said, you have to paint what you see. And I'm like, oh, great. I woke up the next morning, I don't know how to paint. I don't know the first thing about painting. And I was lucky enough to have, some friends who know how to paint. So I was lucky enough to be able to be taught that. And last night was my first night in the studio, and I created a piece that was dedicated to the April 15th the lunar eclipse. So it was wonderful. Oh, yeah, so we're out of time, unfortunately. The hours go by so fast when you're on. Is there anything that anybody needs to know about what you have coming up quick, or where they can find you, or what you have going on?
Yeah, you got my website, handclow2012.com. And then, because that's how I communicate these days the most effectively.